Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and Coco the Weiss Cat is home in good hands while I play the Secaucus Regionals and take a well-earned vacation. This trip wasn't just regionals on Saturday for me. I was with a larger group and we did some really cool stuff and hit up some really cool places, and it was a super fun weekend. But now that I'm home, I can sit down, relax, finally get a good night's rest, and then break out my notebook and take a nice read of all the notes I made about the tournament, and of course, turn those into a video to share with you folks at home. So I'm going to jump in with the parts of the trip in a second here, but first, a big shout out to all the viewers I met at the event. There were some people I finally touched base with that I'd meant to look for in previous tournaments, but ended up being too caught up in the day to do so. Thanks so much for your support for the content I make, and meeting you in person was an absolute blast, even if I ended up being a little busier in the latter half of the day than I meant to be. But we'll talk about that when I start going over the tournament itself. So without any more introduction, let's get into it. So the tournament we're talking about here is the Secaucus Regionals for Fall 2019. The location is New Jersey, and the format is singles. Obviously, my playgroup knew we were going to attend because we're all about regional events on the East Coast. So we made some driving and hotel arrangements, and Friday night we got underway. The deck I was piloting was classic standby SAO. It's an old school standby build that doesn't run the more diverse level 3 toolbox and the hard level 1 combos that some of the newer builds do. It's red, blue, and yellow, and it's pretty tough to deal with. I've been piloting it for about a year and a half, I have a decent amount of experience with it, and I'm confident about the current meta. In this fall regional, I had expected a lot of Sunshine, a lot of Konosuba, and a butt ton of Bang Dream. Generally, I like those matchups in terms of my chance of coming out on top. The only things I really wouldn't want to see on the other side of the table would be like Gun Gale, because it's kind of a pain for me to fight with and has memory kick backups for my endgame, and of course the Anti-Spiral, which is my absolute worst matchup hands down. If someone played a Mugen on turn 1 on the other side of the stage and I was piloting standby, I'd just scoop. Just kidding. I just hard play my 2-2 Lisbeth and not care. But it would still be a giant pain in the ass. So the Secaucus Regionals were obviously held in the Secaucus Expo Center. But before we talk about it, I'll just briefly talk about the hotel we stayed in. Our crew did the classic sardine pack into a single room of the Embassy Suites right next door to the convention center. Naturally, the convenience factor was great, and from the outside and just in the public areas of the hotel itself, it's a gorgeous place. But honestly, for the price, it's not the best hotel I've stayed in. The second bed was a pull-out, and not a good one, and the bathroom lacks some basic comforts, like a fan or a shower that just worked properly the first time you tried to use it, and also no complimentary water bottles or snacks since they were selling them at standard scalping prices at the convenience shop downstairs. Now, that's not something I'd expect from any hotel obviously, but at the price point the Embassy is, I might have. I think if the room was about $80 cheaper on the whole, it would have been a pretty good deal and I would have felt like I got what I paid for, but the actual accommodations were not as good as they could have been. On the bright side, the stay did come with several complimentary breakfast coupons, which was a pretty impressive buffet with a full omelet bar, and some drink coupons for the hotel's bar, which served one of the best whiskey sours I've ever had. So it was a mixed bag. I might consider staying there if I go to Secaucus again, but I'd also hunt for other options. Anyway, on to the tournament venue, which again is a mixed bag for me, but mostly on the good side. The Secaucus Expo Center is massive. I had no trouble navigating between the seats and tables at all, and the play space was more than ample. In fact, it was so big, traveling between the bathrooms, the vendors, and the play spaces actually took some time, but I'd played there before, and I generally appreciate it. Considering the amount of bodies, I think they could have cranked the AC a little harder, but I'm sure they wanted to sell as much Gatorade as humanly possible at the food stand. So in general, the venue was great for a Weiss tournament, and of course the much bigger Vanguard tournament which was going on at the majority of the tables. I really only had 2 complaints. First, the chairs they used sucked ass. They were extremely flimsy plastic folding chairs, not comfortable at all, a bit low for the tables, and while I'm not a big guy, I felt like I might break them if I sat down on them too hard. And second, the bathrooms are kind of low capacity. I had to go back multiple times throughout the day because they were just full up. Considering the size of the actual venue, the bathrooms are tiny and not well kept to be honest. Some of the paper towel and soap dispensers ran out and weren't refilled, and one of the toilets was just foobar all day. You know, when you open a stall door and no matter where you are on the desperation scale, it's just not an option. And no, I did not take a picture of it to throw up while I talk about it. I don't think anyone wants that. The vendors this year were both on one side of the room, which was kind of nice. I didn't get the name of the second vendor since they didn't seem to be putting it visibly on the booth, but the first one was Brothers Grimm. I've always liked dealing with them at the conventions because they always have an amazing selection of singles and equipment, and this year was no exception. Those binders of thousands upon thousands of Weiss cards that are all organized nicely and priced clearly take a lot of effort to put together and are heavy to lug around to an actual venue, so mad props to them for having such an amazing product lineup. I ended up buying a few things out of the dollar binder and also selling them some stuff from my binder that I'd had trouble getting rid of myself. They're super personable people too. I always like seeing them at these regional events. The second vendor was mainly for Vanguard, but still had a wide selection of equipment. But they also had a ton of sealed Weiss product. I was straight up shocked. ReZero and Batman Ninja had been out of stock or priced pretty high in my region for a while, and they brought a ton of it to sell. Lots of trial decks too. So overall, I really couldn't ask more on the vendor front. A+.
Once again, as a reminder for today's tournament, there are approximately 8 rounds of card fight backyard, approximately 7 rounds for Weiss Schwarz.
So, this is the part where I normally go right into how the rounds went for me, but this time there's one other thing to mention, the buy card. Back in August, I won a buy card in a shop challenge in Maryland, and after some deliberations on the merits and downsides, I decided to use it thinking that it was good for a round 1 buy or automatic win. But as it turned out, the tournament was big enough that the buy card actually gave me the first 2 rounds for free, so I automatically won my first 2 rounds. I wouldn't actually join the tournament until round 3, and I'd be playing in the 2-0 bracket. So what did I do? Well, the first thing I did was sit down where the judges told us to, and challenge another buy card holder to a good old-fashioned free fight. So I whipped out my favorite Kantai deck, which I lovingly call Combat Pasta, and went to town. But then I decided that since there was so much time, I'd just go back to the room and grab my tripod and camcorder and just record some actual footage. So I got the judge's permission and set up at the far end of one of the Weiss tables, and if all has been going according to plan, you've been seeing the fruits of my efforts. But what else did I do? Well, this was the part where I actually got to do a lot of what I came here to do. I free fought. Now, since Free Fight wasn't actually open yet, these were just totally casual games with some players whose opponents didn't show up, some other buy card holders, and one super awesome off-duty judge. I also did some filming, hit up the vendors more, and just generally had a great time. I also got to relax and just chill, which is something I wasn't used to. Back when I played Magic, I had first round buys before, but they were nothing like this. Now, I was well fed and as rested as I could possibly get on that pull-out bed, so there wasn't much else I could gain here. And this is where I want to talk about headspace a little bit. The casual games I played during my first 2 rounds, and just the general place I was in mentally during those 2 rounds, is a place I don't think was conducive to serious play. I know that I didn't feel like I was actually in a tournament until round 3 came. Now, as far as stamina, it was likely beneficial, but one thing that I didn't really take into account was focus. I think sitting out the first 2 rounds really impacted my ability to get into a serious and focused state of mind. Any tournament player experiences it. A lot of other stuff, including hunger and sometimes other bodily needs, fade away and you're way more focused on the game, and I can tell you right now that I never really got that feeling in the tournament today. When I finally sat down in front of my round 3 opponent, while I wasn't even thinking about it at the time, I'd been playing super casual decks that weren't really what I was playing at the tournament and had been in a super chill mood until now, and I never really shifted into that competitive headspace, or the zone. I think going forward, if I were to use a buy card again, I'd like to have someone to play some practice warm-up matches with my actual deck, or just spend the time focusing on my gameplay. But hey, I did get the chance while I was sitting out on the first 2 rounds to not only get in some really fun casual matches, which is something I was really hoping to do anyway, but also meet some subscribers in person, which was stellar. But now it's time for round 3 and the actual tournament report.
Once again, as a reminder for today's tournament, there are approximately 8.
So obviously, this report starts in round 3. I'm up against Persona 5. It's a good set, but a matchup I feel pretty confident I'll win without too much difficulty. I'm coming in with a record of 2-0 on 2 free wins, and my opponent is another buy card holder since our tiebreakers at this point dictate that we will most likely be playing each other. I draw my opener, and it's just kind of alright, and because of the mulligan, I know he's on the yellow package splashing blue for Futaba. He's on the play, so here we go. Round 1, or round 3 I guess, fight. He opens with a Brainstormer on the attack, I like it, and I return with a pretty aggressive swing back. When he hits level 1, he's able to put down the level 2 Joker on a full field, and also start the calling card loop. He calling cards 3 times that turn, which is kind of awkward for me actually, because my hand isn't great right now, and he's managed to mill a lot of his deck. He gets a pretty good search and draw off the Joker combo, and he's going to refresh with 7. Me, on the other hand, I'm actually kind of struggling here. My brainstorms aren't hitting, and I've hit an empty Pan's Climax on a trigger, and I'm taking a lot of damage. I keep drawing groups of climaxes after I take a lot of hits, which just kind of sucks, and it's not giving me a ton to work with. Despite that though, I am able to use my filters like After Party Keiko and Make Close Asana to salvage my compression and still get good attackers on the board. I do get some early plays out with an Asana behind them and I stabilize, but this dude is canceling like a fiend. His compression is okay, but he's calling carding really good hits. He's doing it like twice a turn and barely hitting any climaxes. So the game is going on for a long time despite running a lot of attacks his way and compressing fairly well myself because he's just not taking any damage. I seriously cannot stick a single attack on this dude. We actually went to time when I had just hit level 3 and he was still level 2. but unfortunately, despite attacking him way more times, I was losing the damage race and tried to catch up by swinging with my full finishing package. I also healed down to 3-0 just in case. I attacked him 6 times that turn on just okay compression, and he still only took 1 hit. It felt so awful. He swung back and didn't quite kill me, but there was no catching up. We were on turns, and this dude wasn't even level 3 despite me attacking him a lot more. All in all, he hit a lot of cancels in the right places, and I hit a lot of unlucky triggers and draws that put me back pretty hard. I lost on turns, which meant that despite having 2 free wins, I was 2-1, which felt pretty bad. But in that game, it didn't feel like there was much I could have done. I played well with what I had, recovered from some pretty brutal circumstances, and got in a lot of attacks, so I shook it off and headed into round 4. After all, X1 is still nothing to sneeze at. This is always a super interesting one, the mirror. While it's not a matchup I think is totally in the bag for me when I sit down, I really enjoy playing it because it's a huge learning experience. And I still feel confident in it because I do have a lot of experience piloting standby. But in this case, our decks turned out to be pretty different. The cards we were playing that were the same are as follows: Temporary Alliance Kirito, Silica On Guard, Close Call Silica, Attack and Waves Asuna, and of course, Heinous Trap. His build was different in every other regard. That became very apparent when he opened by playing 1 Sister Fonda for Brother Lifa in the back row, 1 in the front, a Close Call Silica, and stood by a level 1 Lisbeth on turn 2. He started to use the Sister shenanigans where you can pay 1 and top check 4 when you play a Climax very aggressively, and he was running 4 Empty Gate, which really padded out his hand. But while he was triggering gates and swinging with Lisbeths, I was actually swinging with Silicas and 1k1s. In fact, I only stood by twice in that matchup because the 1k1s were giving me a ton of momentum against him, and my hand was pretty good the whole time thanks to my Brainstorms hitting and my Silica filtering. It feels very strange to drop Heinous Trap with After Party Keiko to salvage what I want, but sometimes it's the right call. I kept a good handle on my resources, let him slide close to level 3 without quite taking him there, and then unleashed the full Attack and Waves combo after healing down to 3-0. I killed him dead, and after the match we talked a lot of shop about standby. Even though we started with the same staple package, we were playing very different decks. His version with Sister Fonda for Brother Lifa, the 1-0 Lisbeth, and the Vice Commander backups is a little more resource efficient and definitely generates more hand advantage. But my version can be way more aggressive and pushes a lot of field power, even though I'm not ending the turn with 7 cards in hand usually. I fought from the stage, and he fought from his hand. But I also fought from a position of knowledge on the match, including a lot of playtesting with Sister Fonda for Brother, and I feel like a lot of that paid off in this matchup. 3-1, and on to the next round. Now, here's something I wasn't expecting at all. Maybe I would face a Fate deck, sure. The chances were low, until December that is, but what are the odds I was gonna get Golden Boyed in Gate of Babylon? It's Gilgamesh Waifu, boys. Dude's 3-1 with the King of Heroes and he wants to sacrifice me to the Holy Grail. But unfortunately for our overconfident archer, standby is super hard for Gilgamesh to deal with. And once I started memory kicking the only things he was able to keep out on the board, it was pretty one-sided. The deck didn't seem to be working for him too well, and while I did have a bit of a rough start, I swung back really hard mid-game and started sending Gilgameshes out of the game. He pretty much ran out of attackers before I got to finish him off, and swinging him to 3-7 was more of a formality. Aside from Aya itself, which can actually shut down the Attack and Waves combo, Gilgamesh has pretty much nothing that can deal with standby besides the Rin anti-change backup, which he ended up having to play to the stage because he was just that start for characters after a few turns. Well, it was a round, and playing against Gil was different and fun, totally something I didn't expect to run against today. We're 4-1 and still doing pretty well all things considered. Off to the races. Okay, something a little more toward what I was expecting. Love Live Sunshine with the Ruby +2 Soul level 1 combo. This happens to be the deck I'm most familiar with how to play against, which is a blessing and a curse, thanks to my friend who was judging that day. Sunshine has been his main squeeze for about as long as Standby has been mine, and we've been mashing it ever since. So I was able to follow every move, predict what he had by what he played, and punish him where I should have. I got some good standby triggers off while he did a lot of early canceling with Mirai Ticket, meaning the Ruby combo was offline. Now he did stabilize with 2 Chicas and 2 Yos the moment he hit level 2, but I was pretty safe at 1-4 when he swung in, and when I hit level 2, I responded how I normally do to Sunshine. I played bigger stuff for lower costs, stood by an Asuna for free, and made it all go away for good. After losing 3 level 3s at level 2, he really struggled to come back and really wasn't able to close me out. I hit 3 and he rode the waves. At the end, he was pretty unlucky to trigger 2 gates before he died, but even without that, it was still pretty rough for him. We're 5-1 boys, the wheel of fate is turning. Okay, now things are getting interesting. This is the final round and I have a pretty decent shot at top 8, but I'm across from something I actually didn't expect. ReZero. I thought it would show up here and there, but I thought the odds of playing against it were pretty low, and this is where not being in the competitive zone or headspace really hurt me. If I was smart, I would have picked up every card and reread it because I have almost no play experience against the meta ReZero deck, but instead I lost a close call Silica to a pure and innocent Amelia like a dumbass because I forgot that card was Armine and not Armine Light, so I spent the first half of the game with fewer choices because of that, but I still built my field and stood by. By the end game, my finishing package was about 80% there. I could swing for all my attacks, but not ideally where I'd be keeping all the characters I wanted. But thanks to me triggering and drawing some climaxes mid-game, I was losing the damage race. I couldn't quite close him out because he was doing some mad good last damage cancelling. I got him to 3-6 with almost no cards left in deck, but that's not dead. Now I was in a pretty decent spot to survive a swing back and close it out next turn because my compression was pretty awesome at the time, but after cancelling 2 attacks for 2, I took 5 off the top on a direct and lost. At the end of the day, it was a match I lost to a combination of minor mistakes, matchup knowledge, and some bad luck. If 1 or 2 of those factors hadn't been there, it's tough to say whether or not this would have turned out differently. It was one of those matches where even looking back on each individual move, I didn't really get a satisfying answer to where I lost the game or whether or not I should have played the tempo differently. But one thing's for sure, I would have felt a lot better about the loss if I had been in the zone mentally and knew I played at my best and still didn't get it, because there's 100% nothing wrong with that. But to be honest with myself, I don't think I did. And even if it was luck at the end of the game more than my mistakes early on, whichever I blame it on, losing a game you know you could have played better never feels good. That one hurt. My final record was 5-2, and I ended up placing pretty close to the cut, but of course, not quite a top 8er today.
Once again, as a reminder for the course of today's tournament, there are approximately 8 rounds of card.
Well, with the final round over, the only thing left to do was to get my games in for free fight. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, I was part of a larger group that had plans after the tournament to go into New York City, so I wasn't able to stick around too long to hang out and play. But this is where I'd like to talk a little bit more about what happens after a Weiss tournament at a regionals event. First and foremost, people are there after the tournament looking to get their free fight promos, and this is always something that ends up kind of being a clusterfuck. Generally what happens is you have to go up to the judge's station, grab a paper form, then play a game with an opponent, then come back up to the table together, report the result of the match, and then get a stamp. Then you go and do this with a different person and get a second stamp. Then you take that completed form and go exchange it for a promo. When you take that just as it is, it doesn't sound too bad, but there's one problem. The lines. To get the free fight promo, you need to stand in line with other players 3 or 4 times, first to get the form, then to get the form signed and stamped for game 1, mind you, with your opponent, and then do that a second time with a different opponent, and then, if the same judge who's signing the form isn't handing out the promo, stand in line again to get it. And this is basically logistical hell. Not only does free fight open after the tournament starts, but it closes just after the tournament ends with little time afterwards. And I apologize, but this is becoming kind of a rant. So you need to find 2 different opponents that are both not involved with other stuff in the moment, including the actual tournament or other plans, and get them to stand in a long line with you and other people who aren't even free fighting for the same promo, and get it done in a very short window of time, all things considered. And this process requires the undivided attention of several Bushi judges. Not only that, but because Bushiroad wants you to play actual games and not just say you did, judges have to deal with people who just either came up alone and can't verify their opponent, or people who just obviously wrote stuff onto the paper without playing. Look, I'm going to be honest, I think this is an awful way to hand out promos. I can see what they're going for here, but it would require a lot more organization to run smoothly. This creates a logistical nightmare for both players and judges, and I've never liked it. I think to rectify this, you need to loosen the requirements of the promo, or devote more resources to the organization of free fight. So either hand out the free fight promo without the requirement to verify games for both players at once, or do more to administer free fight itself. Personally, I'd like to see something more along the lines of what other games do for large events, where free fight, as it were, takes place in a designated area with 1 or 2 people administering it actively. I can see 1 or 2 Bushiroad judges kind of hanging around that specific area since there's generally plenty of open space in whatever venue I've been to. Maybe it would be better if it was more actively administered in a designated area, but maybe not. What do I know? On that note, one final thing. John Ken Pun, or as it's known here, rock, paper, scissors. Bushiroad always does this at the end of tournaments where the players interested will gather by the judge's booth and throw rock, paper, scissors against the judge until there's 1 person standing. Then they can win a prize. Personally, I've never liked this because not only does it feel really unorganized, but I've also seen some people who lost in previous rounds stick around and end up winning anyway. Just for me, I'd prefer a much simpler badge raffle because it's much more fair. But these are minor complaints. Overall, the experience at regionals was really fun. Like I said, I didn't get to stay too much after the actual tournament because we ended up having plans for the night. And after we left, we went into New York, visited some cool places, and got some awesome ramen. We stayed in the embassy another night so we wouldn't have to drive back late, and ended up going to an awesome Asian superstore for lunch before we finally packed it in and hit the road. Now that I'm back and put in a lot of sleeping hours, I've gone over my notes, finalized my thoughts, and I can put them together in this video for you viewers at home.
Once again, as a reminder for today's tournament, there are approximately
I've said it before and I'll say it again, Secaucus Regionals this year were super fun. I got to see a bunch of folks I normally don't get to see, and I met some awesome new people. Even though I don't feel as good about my actual tournament play as I'd like to, I really enjoyed every game, both serious and casual. Oh, and one last thing, a big congrats to Kit Kang from Burn 1 who took second place and got the coveted invitation to Worlds. You deserve it, dude, and best of luck. Check out his channel for more Weiss content if you ever get a chance. And for Weiss content in general, Weiss Schwarz continues to be a big source of enjoyment for me, and I'll be attending more of its events in the coming months. And speaking of the coming months, there's a lot of exciting things happening. 2019 is starting to wrap up, and we've got some exciting new decks to tech, some awesome new sets to open, and a whole year of Weiss Schwarz to discuss. Look forward to more content around all of that, as well as games and other new styles of content I'll be experimenting with in the near future. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.